Welcome to the office hours of Kanban from AgileFever and Kanban USA. Today we have with us is Aparna, and I think we have Coach Taz too. Thank you, Aparna, for accepting our invite to speak in our webinar today. Glad that you
My
will.
pleasure.
Thank you. So I think like any other day, any other Kanban office hours that we do, there is an open agenda. All of us are here to discuss questions and stuff that we're doing about Kanban. And if you have some questions, any myths, any facts that you want to cross-check with the fellow folks who are implementing Kanban, that this would be a great place for us to get started on this. So with that, I would open. Aparna, if you have anything else to add, we are open to questions before get started.
Just wanted to add, I look forward to a great session with all of you all. I look forward to learning with all of you all. So
awesome. Okay, guys. So like I mentioned, there would not be an agenda here. It's just for discussion only and asking and clearing questions and listening to perspectives. So we have Anna. We have. Okay, thanks, Taz. Peter, we have Frank. I'm not calling out some names because they are my team members. So, and other folks here on the call. So Frank, if you would like to introduce Anna, if you would like to introduce yourself, Aiden, quickly, and maybe let us know why you're here. If you have any questions, that would be great.
Hello everyone. So I discovered Kanban USA. I'm right now I'm in French, but try to localize in USA. I am Scrum Master. I don't have specific question, but as I like to say, it's ISO light. So I come in and try to learn more and exchange with others.
Nice. Did you have experience in Kanban earlier, or you're just starting?
No, I have some experiences, not a very deep one, more focuses on Scrum, but I have some little experience on Kanban.
Awesome, thank you. Same thing to say, Trent, Kaden, others joining too. Trent is just connecting. Kaden, Peter. Do you guys have specific questions? No? Silence? If you want to introduce, Peter, if you want to introduce yourself and then some bit of discussion.
No.
Wait, were you talking to me?
Yes, I think if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, pardon.
Yeah, you were a bit audible. I couldn't really make out what you was trying to say. You were talking a bit low. I was like, wait, are you talking to me? Hi. Sorry. Good morning, because I'm in Eastern time zone. Good morning. My name is Kanban. It's a pleasure to be a part of this. I'm really here to learn. I don't even know specifically what you wanted me to introduce myself and what else. Did you ask a specific question?
Did you have any questions?
No, not at the moment, but I will definitely utilize the chat if I do. That's all right.
Okay, thanks.
All right, cool. No problem.
First, here I'm from USA, Michigan. Peter.
My turn?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I introduced myself last time. I don't know if any of you guys were still here. I'm a business agility coach. Been doing that for 15 years or so. From Kanban and everything in between. So I'm sort of interested in more advanced topics, especially the scaling and enterprise, the business agility level.
Scaling in enterprise Kanban, using that, right? Okay.
Well, in this case, of course, yes. I'm agnostic, but this is a Kanban forum, so.
Okay, awesome. Okay, but I think we got a topic to start. You are muted.
All right, let's get started talking a little bit about scaling Kanban. So a quick request before we get started, Sharat, if you can make me a co-host and let me share my screen, etc.
Sure. Okay.
All right, so I hope y'all can see my screen here. Oops.
Yep,
Cool.
we'll see it.
This is actually a Miro board that I use very often when we talk about this idea of scaling Kanban in some ways. So one thing that I want to get started with this idea is that when we are talking about scaling Kanban, we don't use a cookie cutter framework the way we often see whenever we come across any kind of scaling frameworks, be it Scaled Agile or be it Scrum of Scrums, Nexus, etc. So we believe that there is no one size that fits everybody, right? That's because whenever we have certain context that we need to pay attention to, it is important that we do understand the needs of the organization, the arrival rate of new demand, even within a same organization, what's happening in application development is going to be quite different from what's happening in the cybersecurity spaces or with network, etc., right? So this is why it's important for us to understand the context. And when we are scaling up, it's not a one size fits all kind of a way of scaling. So when we talk about scaling in Kanban, it's actually very, very easy to scale Kanban in some ways. So one of the easiest way when we think about it is, how many of you have an understanding of static, the systems thinking approach to introducing Kanban, not implementing Kanban, but introducing Kanban?
Some of us who follow say yes, we do.
Yeah, awesome. So
Yeah.
one of the things that you would come across one of the things that you would have learned if you have read Mike Burrows' book about Kanban or the KSD classes, if you've taken it, is this idea of systems thinking approach to introducing Kanban. So that's where when we begin Kanban itself, we pay attention to starting with what we do now, right? So what's already happening in your organization. We don't typically just reorganize without understanding what's happening. So it would be a way to understand what's happening in the first place and respect what's happening. Because when we are coaches, we've got to understand that they are asking us to improve and build on what they have, not completely drop the performance in the name of improvement, right? So imagine if I were to give you all a keyboard that's right in front of you, like a QWERTY keyboard, and I'm asking you all to type an email. You all have figured out a way to type that email fast, and according to your typing speeds and the needs of your customers, etc. Now, if I were to give you the fastest keyboard on earth, which is probably the Dvorak keyboard, what would happen to your performance? It will drop, despite the fact that it is probably the best way of organizing your keyboard in the first place, right? All your vowels are grouped together in that. Your most commonly used consonants are grouped together. You would be wondering, where the heck did the A go? Where did the H go? Where did the I go? They've all shifted places. So think about it in some ways like that, and pay attention to what's already going on in your organization. Respect that and start your journey in scaling from there. Start with what you do right now, right? And when you start there, and then think about scaling it from that point onwards, right? So what's already in your influence? So start unhiding what's going on in terms of the workflow. Start building on it with a sense of where your customer is and with a service orientation. Sorry. Does somebody want to add something?
I just want to throw this in that I love this analogy because the QWERTY keyboard was specifically designed to be slow.
Yes.
I don't know if everyone knows this. And so, a lot of times when we go into an organization, maybe they did not design themselves to be slow, but that's what they are. And
Exactly right.
they don't even realize it.
Yes. So it's exactly right. So start with what you do right now. Respect that it may be slow. They actually designed it to be slow because when you type a little too fast in those olden days, those typewriters, your keys will get tangled up, right? So they intentionally designed it to be slow, but we've gotten quite fast and we kind of have figured out how to use it in the best possible way we can to, like, type up our emails, to essays, to books, to whatnot, right? We have figured out a way
You're
to,
so cheesy.
yeah. So we're starting with what you do now is important in some
Could we
ways.
mute that person possibly? Or could they mute themselves?
Teresa, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And then next step that you do is unhide what's going on, right? So make sure you use certain practices we learn in our KSD classes, like visualize, improving flow. All of these are different practices you can potentially start using. So unhide what's going on in your organization, right? And think about it from a customer's lens. So start understanding what your customers' needs are to where you're able to deliver it. So start unhiding the workflow as it's happening. So start Kanbanizing. So how much of your workflow has been Kanbanized is a great question to ask when you're like improving in terms of going both left and right of your value stream. Then focus more on the upstream side of it, where you're actually exploring options. And even before you make a commitment, so explore and Kanbanize that side of it. And then you can also Kanbanize in terms of the height-wise dimension, where you can think about where is Kanban being done now? Is it at a operational level? Is it at a coordination level? Is it at a strategic level? So think about the different levels of flow, the hierarchies of items that are involved, your features versus your epics versus your stories, etc. So think about it. You can also think about it from a depth-wise perspective, where it's not about just one single customer service you're focusing on. There may be multiple value streams, multiple customer services you are delivering, and all of those services are intertwined and interlinked in some ways. So there you can think about how many services have been Kanbanized and how are each of your services intertwined, and think about, optimizing from a systems perspective in some ways. So these are your typical type of dimensions you would consider while scaling. Apart from these, you also have other kinds of dimensions, which I'm not going into at this point, but there are scale-free dimensions and scaling based on knowledge work. I hope that kind of gives you an understanding about how we approach scaling. And the fastest way to encapsulate this and tell you about our Kanban scaling principle is that when you're scaling out in a service-oriented fashion, one service at a time, always think about your Kanban system designing from the first principles using static. And also, most important thing in Kanban is our feedback loops itself. So use your Kanban cadences as a way to ensure there is greater levels of balance, and just do more Kanban to Kanbanize.
Thank you. Frank, sorry, Peter was asking a question. Did you have any other specific questions around that, Peter? Maybe?
No, I didn't. It's just a topic that I'm generally interested in.
Okay.
Or rather, that's what, at some point you end up running into when working with large environments.
Yes. Okay. Any problems that you have seen in that you wanted to discuss or something, or in general is fine?
Oh, lots.
Like something that you would to address using Kanban, help of Kanban. Just trying to get more.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think of an example that would be relevant to more people than just that. So one interesting case that I had with a client about 2 years ago was they had their development teams running a mixture of Scrum and Kanban, and their operations teams, their DevOps, they were operations, they weren't DevOps, they were not integrated in the teams, but their ops team, their deployment teams were in Kanban, or trying to anyway. And what happened was that every time they hit a production issue of some sort, like a broken build being deployed or something like that, instead of trying to lower the cycle time or the lead time from build to production, they would put more and more checks into place, increasing the feedback cycle, making it slower and slower, and increasing the batch size. And so basically they were trying to get it right, or rather to make it fail safe rather than safe to fail. And I've seen that pattern a lot with organizations in transition, where, you know, it's just a mindset shift that faster means more broken to them, or more risky anyway. So how do you approach that politically from a change management perspective in a Kanban system?
Well, this is where which screen am I sharing? I hope I'm sharing the right one. So one of the things I hinted at was this idea of customer orientation and this idea of service orientation, right? So when we talk about any kind of service delivery agility, this is how we actually define agility in Kanban, where we talk about what services do you need to improve and who are you actually serving, who are your customers, right? So this is where you've got to understand that what are your customers' expectations around delivery, right? So is it like on a daily basis, just in time, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, etc.? How fast are you today and how predictable are you today? In some ways, a lot of organizations, they have no understanding of what their current levels of capability is. So even before you make promises, you've got to understand how capable are you today? What are your current ability to deliver itself looks like? And also you've got to pay attention to your arrival patterns, your demand patterns, right? So how frequently should you be replenishing your services? What are your arrival patterns? So when you think about agility, you've got to understand and answer these kind of questions in some ways. This is actually a beautiful way of representing put together by Alexei Ziglov. And this is where when we talk about it, we talk about in terms of what is your strategy today, where should you be versus where your current capabilities are. So if you are today at a pre-CI/CD space versus your customers' expectations and your strategy depends on you being closer to a continuous deployment, how do you move your scale from infrequent integration to more continuous integration and continuous deployment? So to me, the way you improve agility is by improving the frequency of your delivery, and that should reflect the transaction and coordination cost of your deployment and your customers' tolerance to take delivery, right? So focus on all of these and you will start to see true agility in your organization.
I absolutely agree. There's no denying that. You and I know that, and people on this call know that. The question is, how do we sell it to traditionally trained risk managers, for example, or IT managers that are, let's say, ITIL certified and basically consider every deployment a major risk, and so their way of minimizing risk is to minimize the number of deployments.
Which is why I would say one of the things you do talk about is redefining how you talk about risk itself, right? So if you kind of add the way you talk about risk itself during your planning, what is your confidence in terms of delivery? In terms of your ITIL, you already do talk about things like SLAs and stuff like that, right? So it's like we know that what kind of weather are we facing today? Today, there is like only 4% probability of rain. So I know I don't have to carry an umbrella with me when I step out of the house. Whereas 7 days from now, the probability of rain is closest to a 60%. So then I would definitely have to carry an umbrella with me, right? So quantify risk in terms of probabilistic terms, and that will help you understand and set better expectations around how you need to communicate the risk itself and how you can actually mitigate and take actions and manage the risk itself in some ways, right? So there is no such thing as good or bad weather in Kanban terms, right? It just talks about the appropriateness of practices being utilized in some ways. So in the same way, what I'm wearing right now is perfect for weather that I'm facing here in Texas. Whereas if I were to go back to India for another vacation or go to Canada to visit some of my friends there, I would have to wear different types of clothes. So in some ways, the way we talk about, our risk, in the way we adopt practices and all of that, you've got to pay attention to the context and the way you actually communicate about it too.
Awesome. I think we have some comment on the chat. Dean Hoffman, if you want to speak for your comment.
Yes. Hi, how are you doing? My name is Deanna. And yes, I'm just commenting on, the whole concept of Kanban is to be simple and to move fast. And those who we are serving get so caught up, as we're saying, in delivery and mitigation of risks that they will seem to double down and want to micromanage a Kanban process and make it so overly detailed as an appearance to make sure delivery happens, as opposed to truly being in an agile process that supports the freedom and flow of what needs to happen.
Awesome.
That's exactly true.
Thank you for your comments, Diana.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Awesome. I think we are surrounded by experts today than people with questions. That's what I can see.
This actually reminds me of this quote from Alicia Uarero. There was this book she's written called The Dynamics in Action, where she describes this actually. You know that they are separate, but you can't separate them. The connections are far too complex in some ways. So if you think about how change feels in an organization, she describes it as feeling like bramble bushes in a thicket, right? It hurts quite a lot. That's because all of your practices are interconnected. So if you're trying to tweak something, it's going to have a great deal of impact somewhere else. So I just love that way that she actually talks about it in some ways. Right. So how do you detangle the processes itself, so that where you are thinking about different groups of practices which have impact on other groups, how you can co-create. So it's a brilliant book if any of you guys want to try it out, but I will say it's quite tedious to read in some ways in one sitting.
Awesome. If you might put the name of the book in the chat, maybe for someone useful, be useful to someone. Okay. That we can call end of answer for that question for now. But do we have any other questions in implementing, adapting, introducing Kanban, using Kanban, any organizations, or any questions? See, some of you are unmuted already. Kevin, Fred, Peter, Jeff. What questions do you have about Kanban today? Thank you for the good conversation, Peter. Question and conversation of Aparna and Diana. But what other questions do we have? Okay, Igor.
Go for it, Igor.
Sorry.
Yeah, from my side, the question is how can we use Kanban for agile transformation and for change management activities?
That's very broad question. Aparna, go ahead. How do you want to do it?
Okay, so when we talk about change, right? One of the reasons I mentioned about the bramble tickets, bramble bushes in a thicket is because it actually hurts quite a lot, right? So this is where Kanban approaches change from a different lens in some ways. It does not go for your typical kind of reorganize everybody and then get started on your agility journey. We talk more in terms of evolutionary journey, right? So for every single practice that you introduce, based on the kind of problems you see in your organization, we actually try to answer the question, so what? Has things actually improved? Has your business outcomes improved because of the practice you introduce? So we go on an evolutionary journey rather than changing everything all at once by prescribing 150 different practices to change in the name of change management, and then assessing to see if all of these different changes are sticking in the right place, right? Are people doing stand-ups? Are they doing it every single day? Is it like for 15 minutes? That's not how we see and assess if your practices are working or have been adopted appropriately in any organization. So we actually approach it from a sense of the culture and your outcomes and your practices, how they all come together in some ways. So we actually look at what are the espoused values in your organization. We see where your values have become weaker and needs nurturing in some ways. So for example, transparency. All of us think that it's an amazing value to have in our organization, right? Especially being so passionate about Agile, we care about things like transparency, we care about things like collaboration. But then most of the people in the team, they don't have access to the tools like your Jira or those certain things. They don't have access to your Confluence pages where you have this information, etc. Then what happens to the value of transparency? It becomes very weak in that organization. Right? So this is where when we introduce a practice, it is about nurturing and strengthening a particular value that is weak. Right? When we say that collaboration is very important, and then we see that every decision is made in silos, then what happens to the value of collaboration? It becomes weak. So this is where whenever we introduce practices in Kanban, it is about addressing values that are weak or that are missing in some ways. Right? So we care about these values, then we introduce practices that will strengthen and nurture them. And then we ask the question, so what? Has our business outcomes improved? Right? Have we gotten faster? Have we gotten better in terms of our transparency? Does everybody, have access to the knowledge, or are there still knowledge silos that are persisting? So we care about these kind of actual outcomes, and then we keep seeing if we've gotten better, that practice then becomes part of our routine habit. Then we explore where other tensions lie, and then we introduce specific practices. We don't have like a one size fits all. You've got to start doing 2-week cadences. We have to do daily stand-ups every day. We have to do backlog refinement every other week or twice a week. We don't come up with these list of practices and then check against that. We look at what's happening and then take specific actions. I hope that addresses your question, or in terms of how we think about change in Kanban.
Okay, did you want to add something?
Thank you.
Awesome. I'm guessing that's answered. If you have any specific questions, maybe you can ask back.
I think Igor's hand is raised, or was, unless he already spoke.
Yeah. No, he was the one who spoke right now, Coach.
Go for it, Diana.
Diana, yep.
Yes, I was just going to mention, we were talking about knowledge being siloed. When we come into a situation to help bring people along in Kanban in use with Agile, it again magnifies the importance of the people in charge of being on the team and wanting this process, because there is a tendency that sometimes they'll come in and say, hey, we're going to do this, but they come in with the fact that they've already decided it's not going to work. Therefore, they hold on to their own power to prove their point instead of allowing us to open up and give all the information to bring everybody in to collaboration for the advancement of the teams.
Exactly. I have always one of the things I learned from Patrick Stewart, right? He is the person who created this idea of Okaloa Flow Lab. One of the things he mentions is that the more you have knowledge silos, what happens is you have all of these different assumptions you are making, right? As you are gathering in the knowledge and you are doing your part in it, then it turns into what he calls as loopbacks, right? So your knowledge silos essentially enable all of your assumptions and it turns it into this loop back. So you do something and then you give it to the next handoff or the delivery that happens, and then that knowledge is actually missing and then it gets sent over again for you to work on it, right? So this is something that I used to experience quite a lot where, back in the days when I was an intern, I worked in a call center, right? So the call would come in and I barely had any kind of knowledge. I was really good at talking up stuff and, managing the customers and trying to smoothen their worries, but I could not actually handle the call. So what I would then do is I would put it through to the second line worker who'd work, right? So the more time I spent with the customers, I understood what their problems are, but the better I got handling it to the particular second line workers, depending on the nature of the call itself. So what it created was, it created more and more knowledge silos itself, right? So this is where, think about what's happening in your organization. You have all of these handoffs that happen and they reinforce your knowledge silos. So this is where in Kanban, we have this amazing practice coming from the manufacturing side called the and-on chords, right? So that's where we talk about it as top the line. So rather than reinforce your knowledge silos, invite that person who actually has the knowledge to handle this problem. Make sure that you focus more on delivering the services to your customer rather than encouraging knowledge silos. Focus on the knowledge being gathered in. If your focus is on analysis, you ensure that even if a tester needs to come in or a QA needs to come in and help solve that problem, you focus on the analysis, the knowledge gathering process itself, rather than sending it back and forth, right? So this is something that has helped quite a lot as we think about workflow as knowledge discovery processes, right? So no longer do any of my teams actually send it back to the developers when they actually come across problems during testing, right? So they know that the focus is no longer on development, it is actually on testing and validation. That means if there's a problem that comes up during testing, they invite the developer to come and handle it, and the focus continues to be on testing. And then the next one would be about delivering it to our customers. So this is where, collaboration improves the more you reduce knowledge silos and you take appropriate practices and introduce it in the right way using our Kanban.
Thank you, Aparna. Yep, follow-up question on that. I see someone unmuted. Okay. What questions do we have later on then moving forward from that? We got quite a good folks, 18 folks, and I'm sorry guys again, there was a mix-up with the link today and we tried to make the changes soon. We were unsuccessful. It's a lesson learned for us. We will make sure we get that right the next time. Any other questions that you guys have in regards to Kanban implementations, Kanban, anything Kanban? We have very good coaches here with us today. Aparna, I think Coach Stan. Sorry, go ahead.
I have one lined up, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation. So if there's other questions, I'll yield.
Go for it, Peter.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love your questions. They are very interesting.
So I have to admit, I'm self-taught in Kanban. I don't have any formal training. And one thing I noticed that there used to be talk about enterprise service planning, a while ago. Things like triage tables and dependency cost of delay maps and stuff like that. Whatever happened to that? Is that part of Kanban, the Kanban maturity model now, or was that sort of dropped along the way, or did they migrate or into something else?
Still there. It's still there, Peter. So if you look at my Kanban posters, one of the posters I have on the other side is actually the triage poster. So it's a brilliant poster, and it's got such a lot of mathematical rigor behind it. So I will definitely suggest that you do go to kmm.plus and you look up about the triage tables, and the ESPP is still happening, and it's a wonderful course as well. So I had fun learning ESP with David Anderson.
Yeah, I had fun applying it. I just didn't know if it was still a thing or,
It's quite advanced material, but yes, it's something that comes in so handy in some ways.
I find that it helps bring the conversation to the executive level.
Yes.
If you apply cost of delay in a more rigorous way than just, what SAFE does.
Yes.
We can actually speak about dollars per month, quite literally.
Yes.
And when you go to a director or VP of IT and you tell them, look, your cost of delay at the moment is like $1.5 million per month across all of your IT services. And if you lower capacity utilization by 10%, which would cost you, I don't know, $50,000 in contracting cost, you will literally cut that cost of delay in half. You do the math. And they're like, how do you know that? Well, let me pull out the triage table. Well, not exactly, but it looks complicated. It's not. I'm gonna say the way it's explained in the posters look complicated and they're not particularly well organized in some sense, but the concepts are actually pretty clear, especially if you can translate the various cost of delay profiles to the business's reality. Because not everyone understands how a Taylor Swift concert connect to the security team, but
very true. For everybody who's wondering where this conversation's going, let me give you all a very brief hint about what Peter is actually talking about, right? So one of the things that in Kanban we talk about is prioritization is actually one of the biggest waste of time, because it actually hides multiple problems in that one single word, right? It's not very actionable. And in Kanban, we pride ourselves in being very actionable and pragmatic with our guidance, right? So because priority is actually masking 4 different problems: sequencing, scheduling, selection, and clauses of service. So what happens very often is in a backlog, you mark a lot of things as high priority, very high priority, medium priority, low priority. But what does the word priority even mean? Right? So you are masking all of these words, and then you have 40 high priority items, and then you waste your time prioritizing and reprioritizing. Whereas when we talk about these 4 different problems in its proper sense, like sequencing, is it a problem around sequencing? Does this go before or after? Scheduling, when should you start to work on a particular item? Selection, what should you work on next? Class of service, how do you actually treat this particular request when compared with all of the other requests you're working on, right? So this is where we also introduce this idea around triage itself, triage and triage discipline. And the word triage actually comes from the Crimean Wars, right? So when the entire battlefield technology changed, what happened was you have a weapon that was devastating in some ways compared with what was happening in the World War I. So all of your field hospitals were struggling to cope because the number of people who were injured and wounded kind of was really, really high. It was unprecedented scale in some ways. So they started coming up with this triage technique where they kind of categorized all of those soldiers pouring into now, later, or not at all, right? So if you kind of treat that soldier right now, then you can save the life. Whereas this soldier can wait. Yes, he needs attention, but he's not immediately dying. So he can like wait a few more minutes or even an hour or so. You are starting to triage, right? And then you also had this category of not at all, where unfortunately this soldier will die regardless of whatever intervention we do, right? So it's a very sad situation. So this is where you escalate and let it die. In your organization, if you have certain black triage items, you escalate, you bring a lot of awareness, but you don't spend more resources on it because it's very limited, right? And then you also have the not at all, another good category. Yes, he is wounded, but he's so mildly wounded that he can go back and continue fighting on, right? So this is where you have this idea of triage that comes in, and based on your understanding of delivery delay cost, you actually make you come up with an idea of how do you triage itself. Is this like a category where you have to like treat it right now, right away, or can it wait till later? So you kind of build in this idea of triage discipline based on your understanding of delivery delay cost, which is like a combination of your understanding of your current capability to deliver, cost of delay, etc. So it's a brilliant way of thinking about making decisions itself.
Thank you, Aparna. Any questions or comments on what Aparna just mentioned? Observations? Want to add something, Coach Taz?
Oh no, I mean she's killing it. Aparna. I'm good. I don't think I need to add any more at this point, unless there are other questions that I can contribute to. But nice job, Aparna.
Thank you, Taz.
Awesome. Thanks, Aparna. I think we saw more people joining. We have got up now 18. Shilpa, Annette, Praveen, some of the folks that was not spoken. If you have any questions, please.
Annette is here. I don't know if you saw that. Annette is here.
Yeah.
Hey, Annette. Long time no see again.
Annette is brilliant.
Awesome to catch up with you here.
Okay, looks like we have an expert.
Hi guys, I'm just listening in, and of course, as always, I'm very interested in knowing what goes on out there elsewhere in the world. I'm sitting in the Nordics, and my clients would probably faint if I showed them a triage table, because they have a very hard time even getting their upstream Kanban up and working. So that would be a bit too advanced in most cases anyway. I've been fortunate enough to work with some managers that have had high ambitions, but still talking about enterprise service planning and the higher maturity levels, which I guess would be a prerequisite for even starting to have the conversation with around triage table stuff like that. Usually I'm starting in the other end, where I'm starting with teams, sometimes a few teams, sometimes all teams in a department, and if I'm very lucky, also on the portfolio level. But those cases are not too often, at least to my experience. And I'm curious to understand. Okay, we can all agree that we know what you guys are talking about, because I mean we are educated as well in how to work with Kanban systems, implement them, and make it grow and make it sure to grow and all the rest of it. But I'm curious to know whether you are often able to get a dialogue with managers, which I would love to have more often than I do now. Or is it the same for you, where you're usually starting at the team level and are starting kind of very low maturity, and then you may raise it to 1 to 2, but going beyond 2, that's very difficult. Is that the same for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Annette, what you just mentioned is a brilliant thing for all of us to make a note of, right? So what you just said is most of the organization have extremely low maturity, right? So when you present something like triage, it is a place where you can easily overreach, which means you are going to stress your organization beyond what they are currently capable of, right? So when you are extremely ambitious and you're designing something that is not something your organization can handle at that point in time, it can immediately, your entire Kanban implementation can fail, right? So this is something that you've got to be aware of. And then there is the other failure mode, by the way, which we call as the false summit plateau, where people think that, hey, I have put in some Kanban charts and I've put in some WIP limits. I have some of these metrics people talk about. Yeah, I'm doing Kanban, right? But there is such a lot of depth to Kanban in some ways, like what we were talking about in terms of your triage discipline and triage tables, etc. It's a very advanced topic, right? So you actually, as a practitioner, need to understand your organization's maturity and suggest practices that are appropriate for that particular organization in a way you don't stress them out too much. And then also you've got to when your organization says, hey, I'm doing Kanban, I've done pretty much everything that is needed, and I want to look at something else, let's try a new framework, let's try in something new experiments, you've got to also unhide and show and reveal to them there's more to Kanban than what they have tried so far, right? So these are things that come when you reach out to us as trainers, as consultants, accredited Kanban consultants, accredited Kanban trainers. We can help you understand about all of these different problems you may be facing, and we can help you with your learning journeys.
In fact, I see you have the KMM tables behind you there, or the pro stuff, and I think that has been immense help as a tool of dialogue with managers, because they often feel that creating agility, that's a team thing, it's not an organizational thing, and then making them understand, hey, you can take your teams to a certain maturity, but forget about organizational maturity unless you start having the managers on board and making them change their ways and their behavior and all the rest of it. But I see that very often, even in very big companies in Denmark, there is a missing link between what goes on with mid-level managers that are kind of in charge of their teams. Fine, we can implement Kanban there, but going beyond that and do the full Monty with top-level management, it's very, very difficult to get them to understand that it's also their business and they should mind. And it's not only a team thing.
Absolutely. I would add on that certainly at Cisco, getting leadership buy-in has definitely been pivotal for me. I would not have gone down this journey, honestly, without their buy-in, because how important it is for them. So they went through, Kanban training as well as the teams, right? The engineers, the project managers, the service delivery managers. It was a full-on effort if they wanted to adopt Kanban. Again, that was their choice. And so leadership is pivotal, right? I have weekly meetings with them as well, but they also are moving toward wanting to, for instance, take the KLP, right? Things that they wouldn't have even thought about before, because we talked business. We didn't talk about Kanban per se. They knew what it was. They knew we were doing Kanban, obviously, but it was more from we recognized the audience and we said, okay, VPs and senior VPs do not care about Kanban boards or systems per se, but if you can navigate the conversation in a way that it resonates with them, then the conversations can happen even though they don't realize that it's really, enterprise services planning, or they don't realize that, hey, you're using a portfolio, you're managing your portfolio using a, evolutionary change, or, oh, these practices, well, the reason they're evolving is because we're using a roadmap like the KMM to help us get there, or measuring what matters. Those kinds of conversations with them equates to cost of delivery, equates to revenue and profit versus loss. All of those things happen with the leadership, but you have to be willing to be brave enough and courageous enough to say, Kanban should not just happen at the team level, and it shouldn't happen without leadership buy-in. That's just my perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, I often have conversations with managers where I don't even use the K word because they kind of get oh no, but Kanban, that's not for us. That's
buzzwords.
But having a discussion about would you like to minimize transaction cost or coordination cost? Getting back to the drawing that you showed from Alexei Seglov, that's a different matter. Or would you like to have quicker time to market, stuff like that? Which is of course the effect of Kanban. I mean, and I guess that's when at least earlier in my career I was so. I mean, when I first discovered Kanban, it was like, hey, this is what I've been looking for. I've been working agile for so many years and didn't really succeed to create the results that I was expecting and that I was promised by those agilists. And then I discovered Kanban and was very absorbed in that, and I wanted to talk about Kanban whenever I got the chance to do so. And then later I realized they couldn't care less about Kanban. They care instead about business issues, by making more money, by getting more done by the organization they have without too much hassle and those kinds of things. So I changed the way I had the conversations, and as mentioned, I very often don't even mention Kanban.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I had to learn as well that those words are just buzzwords. At the end of the day, they could care less, and that's okay. That's not a judgment against them. It's
absolutely.
Just, yeah, it's absolutely.
We need to focus.
Yep.
I hope we're not wasting everybody's time here.
Oh, so, yeah. Well, yeah, hopefully, yeah, we're sitting here kind of in this little bubble having a conversation. Sorry about that, folks. Hopefully you learned something there as well.
Yeah, that's a key learning for everybody. So managers and leaders, they don't care about whether you're doing Scrum or Kanban. What they do care about is business outcomes, right? So every practice, make sure you map it back as coaches and as consultants, especially since all agile coaches and consultants are getting a very bad rep these days. Prove that you are making a difference by connecting every practice introduced to business outcomes that have improved because of your guidance. So map it back, keep coaching journals, keep a track of how your outcomes are improving with every single guidance you're providing, or the teams actually self-organizing and improving with every experiment that they are trying, please.
Awesome. Thank you, Aparna. I know we started very late today, the conversation 10 minutes after we kicked off. We will take one last question. We are already at time, correct? So if you guys have any other question, we'll take one last question before we wrap up the session today.
And if anybody is dropping off, thank you all so much for joining us. And it was a pleasure to learn with you all. And feel free to contact me on LinkedIn or my email address if you want to continue any of these conversations.
I'll connect with you on Slack.
Yeah, I guess it's Slack, is it? Okay. Awesome. So we will be sharing this video. If you have come through Meetup, if we will be sharing you that. If you have registered on LinkedIn, we will share you on your email. But you will get the what's her email address? Yeah, we can send that, Aparna.
She has her link up there at the top. Yeah. Oh, there she go. Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, if you're looking for any upskilling, please reach out to us. We can help you with that too. Right? The session is just to help you out with the Q&As in Kanban. And any other questions? Hey,
thank you for facilitating, supporting this. Looking forward to next month.
Awesome.
And thank you
so much for contributing to the Kanban USA. That's been with us last 3
Yep, I mean,
Yep, I'm learning to know who is, right? Awesome. Thank you so much.